Okay, so I want to go into the final tool. We're on the home straight, and this is about thinking big, thinking long distance, thinking spectacular. And one of the things that is a recurring theme throughout this isn't just about inspiring you to do more, because the people that are sitting in this room by your very nature are inspired to do big things anyway. This is also about inspiring the people that you employ to do more. This is really what this is about. It's about having a really clear focus. It will help you, but it'll also help the business perform way better. And it's really about trying to grow your business by 10x, where all of your competition are trying to grow by 10%. If you can think in that, so Dan Sullivan uses the term, it's easier to go 10 times than, what is it, 10 times than 2 times? I can't remember. But the point is, when you think about 10xing your business, you have to think completely differently. Like if you think about it, servicing clients, if you've got 100 clients and you think, I want 1,000 clients, I can't deliver it in the same way. You cannot do it in the same way. I have to think about it differently. And that's what this is all about. It's about trying to get you to think differently and creating what we call, what gets termed the moonshot. And the moonshot is born out of originally the terminology used by JFK, where he said, we want to be on the moon by the end of the decade. And it really was, a brilliant concept in the sense that clearly there was a very clear timeline on that. But ultimately it was like, right, this is the big goal. We've no idea how we're going to get there. It's totally impractical to put this deadline on it, but amazingly, they actually did it, assuming you don't believe all of the rural rumors about it. It was all fictional and it was done in some studio in Hollywood. Yeah. But it is, ultimately, if you're thinking how you can go 10 times bigger while your competition is thinking about going 10% bigger, it means that you're playing a very, very different game. And so then this term moonshot was coined in the business world by a guy called Astro Teller. Astro Teller was the guy running Google X, which was the experimental part of Google at the time. And so it's really about trying to think, okay, how do we create this apps? If you think about the moonshot, it was to be on the moon by the end of the decade. It's really simple. It's really easy to remember. Everyone that's at NASA knows exactly what the goal is, and they know when they've got to do it by. And of course, we saw this very clearly with our speaker last workshop, but absolutely really clear moonshot of, I am going to do this. We are going to do it regardless of what it takes. We are going to do it. And ultimately, when we empower the team to do this stuff, they understand the why behind it, and therefore they will go, to take the terms from Man's Search for Meaning, he who understands his why will withstand almost any how. So you will get so much more out of yourself and the team. And again, another example of this on the podcast, a guy called Sam Perkins, amazing guy, into triathlons, and then got diagnosed with motor neuron disease. And he was like, I was supposed to do the outlaw. I'm still going to do the outlaw. And then COVID got in the way. So of course, with COVID cancelling triathlons, it meant that he a whole year, bearing in mind this is somebody that's diagnosed with an illness that typically people last 2 to 3 years post-diagnosis on. He lost a year because of COVID of doing that. So I then do the first triathlon I do after COVID was the outlaw half. And Sam literally was standing there in our wetsuits ready to get and swim, and we all part ways, and these guys bring Sam through. It was absolutely incredible. And in fact, we interviewed on the podcast Ian Hamilton, the organizer of the Outlaw. He's been running triathlons for 20 years. And I said, look, there must be a story within that 20 years that really kind of hits home the most. And he said, yeah, it was Sam Perkins. It's absolutely incredible. So having a clear moonshot, a clear goal, helps so many, and we see it so many times in the podcast. But I really saw, and this is the bit that I was referring to earlier about the boat, I really saw this when I was selling Efficient Portfolio, because before we were decided we were going to sell EP, we'd got lots of different goals. But if you'd sat down and said, what is the one single goal that you must do within a specific time frame, then I would have struggled to say which one was more important. And then we decided that we were selling the business and we were selling it in this time frame. Originally it was 5 years. We ended up doing it in 2, but we're going to sell it within 5 years and we're going to sell it for this number. As soon as we did that, everything else became really, really easy. Because, and I hadn't read the book, Will It Make the Boat Go Faster at the time, but I'd heard about it a few times because people had mentioned it on the podcast. I've since read it. It's great. It's a good book. It's not amazing. It's not as good as some people made out. It's very good around goal setting. But the question was brilliant because it was, will it make the boat go faster? If we know that the only objective worth considering is this one here, and we're thinking about creating this app for this or doing this project here, it's like, right, will it make the boat go faster? Will it help us do that? Because if it doesn't, forget it. And it's one of the reasons why I know when we spoke after the last workshop, we talked about, you said at the start of today about bringing, nothing's happening quick enough. Well, you set a 2-year goal, that could easily be a 1-year goal. It'll happen quicker if you do that. So having that clarity of thinking of will it get the boat go faster allows you to make much better decisions. But to do that, you've got to know what the moonshot is because you've got to know what the one single driver is, what you're aiming for. And this comes out absolutely in spades in James Dyson's book. He had absolutely laser-like focus that he was going to deliver this vacuum cleaner and it was going to be like this and it was going to do this. And it didn't matter whether he was bust by the time, it didn't matter whether he failed 1,000 times, 5,000 or 10,000 times. He was going to get there. And it's incredible because he had that laser-like focus. And I think one of the things that, so I did a workshop recently with Abundance 360. We were talking a lot about AI and robotics and all that kind of stuff. And I think what became really apparent, the more we talked about this, was the more that we benefit from AI and robotics, the more important the purpose of the business becomes to everyone in the business, not just the business owner, but the purpose is so important. Because actually what will happen is we will delegate more and more and more of the mundane stuff, and therefore work will become much more about aligning with your purpose. And in fact, we concluded after kind of maybe 100 people brainstorming on this subject that clarity of moonshot and focused learning were the two most important things in a futuristic world. And really, Stephen Bartlett talked loads about this, talks about it on his podcast a bit, but predominantly I think he spoke for about an hour at the conference I was at. Almost everything was about the team and about the people and about how do we build that culture of the business. And he talks about how the culture is mission, behaviors, values, people, and process. And he goes into a little bit more detail on that on some of the podcasts. But he says you've got to start with mission. Absolutely, you must start with mission because that's what empowers everything else. And the mission is the moonshot. That is what we're all talking about. And in fact, he went a little bit deeper in this topic and talked about what actually are the 4 motivations. And the 4 motivations were spell out RICE, so reward, ideology, coercion, and ego. But he said if those are the 4 things that motivate people, the number 1, so this is the order of priority. So ideology, purpose, the why is the most important motivation. And this actually comes out of a conversation. It's an episode I haven't listened to yet, but it comes out of a conversation with I don't know whether he's a hostage negotiator or something. It's something like that. But yeah, so ideology is the most important, and like bribing people, coercion into getting them to be motivated is the least effective. So creating a good moonshot and mission is the most effective way of motivating your team. And this kind of tied in. Has anyone read The Art of War by Sun Tzu? So this kind of ties in with, there's a principle within that book, which actually is it's a really interesting book, isn't it? And it really is the art of war, but there's a lot of lessons within the book that apply to life. One that I took is that essentially when you've got your army of, let's say, 100 people, you've got one person out of 100 will be a leader. They're the people that they're the people that you're building into your leadership team. They're the people that you're building the business around. They're the people you can entrust to drive your business forward. 9 will be the soldiers, and they're kind of they're the workers that are just delivering time and again. They might not be on the leadership team, but they're the ones that you just think, God, I wish I had 100 of them. And then the soldiers are the kind of the normal people. And actually what Heather described earlier on was how she works to try and turn these guys into these guys and these guys into these guys, because actually, some of that is trainable. But the reason I concluded it is because Stephen Bartlett is like, the most valuable asset you've got are your people. He said, you've got to aim to recruit higher than you believe that you're capable of. And you've got to put so much effort into recruiting the best, and be slow to hire, quick to fire, because by getting the right people, you can massively transform your business. So yeah, aim higher than you think you can. He also mentioned about an interview scorecard, which I really like. So we have an interview scorecard. But he had a slightly different system. So we would always interview somebody. So Charlotte would interview them, I'd interview them, Sarah would interview them potentially, depending on which business it's for. And we would each have a scoring system, and then only at the end would we would tot it up. But for example, one of the things that would generate a score for them is their Colbier index. How suited is their Colbier index to their role? But it just creates an impartiality around, because it's very easy to go, I really like that person. That person was really polite, or that person looked really nice, or whatever it is. Whereas actually, if you've got an impartial score, but Cialdini say, if you like somebody, you're going to give them more positive votes. So I think that's really important.